Hi, Rebecca. Good morning. Happy coffee time if you're drinking coffee or tea. So your topic is really fascinating to me. I know you work on mitochondria, a topic that I've loved for years. Can you give me like a simple idea? What is mitochondria? Why are you studying it?
Yeah, so mitochondria is an organelle in the cell. It's a little part of the component of the cell. And if you have to Google the definition of mitochondria, it's the powerhouse of the cell, meaning that it is the part of the cell that produces the energy. And although that is super true, it's just not that. So I like to think normally mitochondria as the computer or the brain from the cell. It casts and gets integrated signals and is the one that is putting all those signals and coordinating responses and is coordinating all those responses into a concept that is called metabolism. So these are two important ideas that I like: brain and metabolism.
Yeah, and I've heard that before. Of course, it's the powerhouse of the cell, creates energy out of things we consume. So you're also saying that it also takes information and signals from what the cell it's in, the rest of the body.
So mitochondria is pretty much in every different tissues of the body. There is only one tissue type, that is the red blood cells, that don't have mitochondria. So sometimes, for example, imagine that you are under starvation, right? So you are not eating, you are fasting, and then your brain needs to work on glucose. So what it does is the mitochondria from the liver senses that and says, I'm not going to use the glucose, I'm just going to use the fat. So I leave all the glucose circulating. So that switch and all that changes in what to use is triggered by the mitochondrial response that talks to the different part of the cells and also to other tissues as well.
Oh, wow. And this is such an interesting example because fasting is kind of popular right now, trying to switch from using sugar to using fat. And that's actually the mitochondria, the brain that decides these things. And I used to think every cell had one mitochondria. That's wrong, right?
That's wrong. Different tissues have different amount of mitochondria. And also the mitochondria from the different tissues, they do different things. For example, the mitochondria from the heart, they have to be super powerful and energetic because think about it, the heart needs to pump all the oxygen that we need to make our body be able to move and responsive and everything. But we have also adipose tissue that we call the fat. They also have mitochondria, but those mitochondria are more into the building process. So they are not so energetic, they are building the fat and they are building some storage that we might need under certain circumstances.
Okay, so they can be more or less active almost, right? Produce more or less energy. Before we move on to your research, I had another question. When I was at Arizona State University doing my PhD, I used to go to all kinds of talks about evolutionary medicine. And one day I heard this crazy thing that mitochondria used to be its own thing, like almost a parasite.
Yeah, so that was like, it was not yesterday, it was 1.5 billion years ago. Mitochondria were originally bacteria. So they were their own entities. They were bacteria that at some point they were engulfed and eaten by eukaryotic cells. We are built up by eukaryotic cells, and they become part of this symbiosis, right? So they were like inside the cell, and they were coordinating actions and providing things that the cell didn't have. So end up being an organelle.
So now they can't be alone. It's outside of the cell.
That's it.
We need each other. So can you tell me a little bit about how do you study mitochondria, in what context?
This is kind of like a long story because I've been doing this for more than 20 years now. I'm from Spain, originally from a little town called Zaragoza, and I did my degree there and also my PhD, and I started working in mitochondria. There is this kind of mitochondrial, it's called mitochondrial diseases. There is some pathologies that don't have a therapy right now. So we try to generate models that can approach mitochondrial diseases so we can understand them better and then try to see whether we can target them to cure them. So this is part of the mitochondrial diseases. But as I told you, mitochondria, they are everywhere in our body. So they are also responsible for cardiovascular diseases, neuro diseases, obesity, diabetes. So they have like a role in all of these different diseases. One of the important things that I didn't mention, but I think you will like this, is that mitochondria are social. They are socializing in the cell with themselves and with other parts of the cells too. So when that doesn't work, there is also diseases that happen. So my overall career in mitochondria started from these mitochondrial diseases into how mitochondria talks to the different parts in the cell, and then how mitochondria is affected mostly in obesity and also in cardiovascular disease.
Oh, can I ask you, socializing, does it mean exchanging information with other mitochondria, other parts? What is it?
The scientific terminology will be fission and fusion. So mitochondria, sometimes they need to get together and mix their components, and then you will see that they form a network that is kind of like a string in the cells. But sometimes the mitochondria need to fragment and become smaller. Because imagine that you have a mitochondria that is not working. You want to eliminate that mitochondria. So then you have to make the mitochondria small so other part of the cell can engulf it and like get rid of it. So sometimes if the mitochondria cannot fragment, you are facing some diseases too.
Wow. And I wanted to ask you something a little bit related but different. I want to bring this to a topic that I was thinking about a lot during my dissertation. I found that people from Eastern Europe, when you ask them about healthy eating, would talk about kind of the same things as Americans do, really. As everybody kind of has some basic idea of how to eat well. But in Eastern Europe, there was this one idea that was unique, the time of food consumption and general time, doing things according to the body's clock. And the reason I paid attention to them because I know that that's actually something that's been studied, circadian rhythms. The idea in Ukraine was that it somehow damages your metabolism if you were to eat a large amount of food at night. Where is that coming from, these ideas? Is there something to them?
So the circadian rhythm is affecting your patterns, affecting your hormones, it's affecting your sleeping rhythm. All that is integrated also into the metabolism again. So there are more and more studies now that are reflecting that mitochondrial function is different at different times of the day. So imagine that it's 8 p.m. and you are preparing to go to bed. Your mitochondria is kind of like sitting down into a process that is more going to the sleepy, and then you just like feed them with a lot of food instead with a little bit. So you are overwhelming those mitos. So those mitochondria might be like either not responsive or have to work more than they should, and then the system in a way might collapse. So that is something that now is they are studying a lot about this way of circadian rhythm and metabolism. It's not my field of interest, but we have contact with somebody who's doing that in New York at Columbia University, and they are planning to send us some samples so we can study that.
Another related question, you mentioned the word warm, and that made me remember mitochondria creates energy, it creates substances, right, building blocks, but it also helps you warm up, right?
Yes, one of the tissues that we have, there is more of that tissue when we are born than what we have now, that is the brown adipose tissue. So when you are born, you are inside your mommy's belly, it's also warm and nice there. And then you are thrown out to the outside world that everything is colder and drier. You have more of this brown adipose tissue, and what it does, this brown adipose tissue, is it burns the energy to generate heat, and it helps us staying warm when it's like changes in temperature. Probably, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that the brown adipose tissue, the amount and the activity is very different from the people in the Antarctica to the people in California. Yeah. So one of the things that, and that's like also a topic of interest that people are doing to treat obesity, because there is a lot of white adipose tissue, they are trying to reconvert that white into brown. There are ways that you can reprogram the brain, in this case will be like the mitochondria and also the nucleus, to think that it's more like brown adipose tissue. You can make that white adipose that is laid back adipose tissue more active.
Now, I have one of my last questions is a little bit silly, but let me explain. Because we're talking about warming up the body. One of the reasons I've had mitochondria in my mind since childhood was because of video games. Once played a video game, had a crazy sci-fi story. The mitochondria becomes self-conscious. It does not like humans. It wants to exist on its own. So it somehow gets the ability to influence other people's mitochondria and warm them up so much, it will melt them. So it started melting people.
I don't know how we could do that. I mean, for you to melt all your lipids and everything that is there, it kind of like decompose. So unless they're like a super social that they eat everything around and super active that make everything break into small pieces, they could make things disappear. But I think they will need an extra superpower for that.
Rebecca, I have a last question. If you had a chance to learn something in 10 minutes like this, what would you like to learn more about?
So I'm very fascinated lately about the immune system, but the immune system is very complicated. But I heard that more and more, the nicest and less aggressive treatment that people are using for cancers are what I call immunotherapy. So it's something that they can target specifically the immune cells with antibodies and then try to block the cancer progression in that sense. So it's something that at first sounded like science fiction. Normally when you treat cancer, you know that you give a drug that is so aggressive that it affects all the cells. This is kind of trying to narrow down to the cells that are affected, kind of like a more specific therapy.
That would be fantastic to learn in more simple terms. Thank you so much. It was amazing to talk about this. Cheers.